Welcome back to Curve Ahead, the podcast where we explore the intersection of innovation, entrepreneurship, and impact. Today, I'm joined by Jim, the CRO of Luxonis, a company using computer vision and cutting edge AI to solve real world problems and push the boundaries of what's possible with robotics and spatial intelligence. In this episode, we dive into how Luxonis built an AI powered computer system used by everyone from solo creators to global space agencies. We also talked about the startup journey from ideation to global impact and how open source thinking helped to build a thriving developer ecosystem. One key takeaway: if you're curious about the future of AI and robotics and how you can build a company that makes a difference, this episode is full of practical inspiration and bold thinking. Let's dive in. This episode is sponsored by Atozi, the podcasting agency, helping amplify your brand's voice. If you give your brand a microphone, what would it say? On this episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Jim, the CRO of Luxonis. Jim, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me on. As you mentioned, I'm the CRO at Luxonis. Just a small background for myself. I've been in the tech space for um, about 15, 16 years now. Worked with a variety of different Fortune 500 companies, startups, got into the computer vision space, which is the business that Luxonis is in about 2020. Started a company with Stanley X. I was in one of their incubation programs, and we had started a small computer vision company. Ended up having to close the doors on that as we were in a place in 2022 where the company was pre-revenue and pre-product, and Stanley X had shuttered its doors. So we had lost our lead investor, but it turned out for the best as my co-founder and I joined Luxonis, which creates computer vision hardware and edge inference, AI cameras. Been with the company for about a year and a half now, and going strong.
What was your experience like for being an incubator? Like, I know that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have that thought of like, oh, well, I have this good idea. I think maybe this is the right path for me. Like, what would you suggest people think about prior to jumping into that sort of experience?
I would say a couple of things that I learned in going through a program like that. I would say first and foremost, like there's probably a reason that you're getting into like a business or an incubator, and you see opportunities in the market. You recognize that there are certain trends emerging, and there are probably some core tenets that you're focusing on is the genesis for the idea and the opportunity. And what I would say is continuously revisit those and think about, do those things still exist as you're continuing to grow the company? And if they are, or have they changed? But basically, do you still see that genuine opportunity in the space? And it's a difficult thing to do, especially early on. You obviously have to have perseverance in your journey. If you need to have conviction that you're going to be able to succeed against all odds, right? Like everybody has read the numbers around startups and know that if you looked at it from a pure numbers game, no one would ever make that choice. But the reason I say that in particular to the incubation is part of the reason that I went along the route that I did was I knew that there was going to be a difficult path to create the deep tech that we needed to create. And it was going to take time and it was going to take energy. It wasn't going to be an overnight success by any means. Partnering with Stanley X at the time gave me the opportunity to have an organization that was behind me and can kind of block and tackle and start to create relationships in the space. And ultimately, when that faded, it it really showed its colors. And it was pretty difficult at that point in time to be able to try to lift the business off the ground. Again, pre-product, pre-revenue, lost your lead investor. Basically, all of the core tenets of things that I thought were going to allow the company to be successful walked away. To wrap it up and to summarize, there's definitely advantages to going through an incubation with a company, and like they'll help you with all of the core stuff, all of the dirty work that you probably don't really think about that you need to do as an early company. Doing competitive analysis, doing customer interviews. Like I think we interviewed over 200 different customers, and we had narrowed down down, tons of different ideas. We had a general concept for where we were going in the space, but weren't really tied to anything specific. So, spent a good 6 months going through and weeding out what the idea was going to be, what the product was going to look like. Had started with just ideation in early talks with customers, and then went to storyboards of product, and then building small samples of product. Right, so like it can be a really useful experience for you to understand what it takes to build and start a company. But again, what I would come back to is once you get in that place, and I would give this advice for anyone who's starting a company: know why, continuously reevaluate the market opportunity. Like large businesses are doing this all the time. That's why they divest themselves of certain business assets. But like when you're a startup and you only have one specific product or product category that you're going after, you have to continuously look at yourself and say, do those core market tenants still exist for me to be able to have success in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think that there's something about entrepreneurship and being a founder that there's so much introspection, right? That you're always continuing asking yourself, am I doing the right thing for what it is that I'm looking to achieve? And am I going about it the right way? And making sure that you're asking those questions in a constructive manner and taking action from the outcome, I think, is probably the most pivotal things that you can do as a founder to just kind of continue to know your why and reevaluate if you're going down the right path.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just, a couple of small points on the previous company. Like we were building a product that allowed us to create editable 3D models of interior spaces. The concept was to disrupt Stanley's tool business, right? Like they envision a world where the people might not be doing DIY work at home. And, you can effectively have materials like 3D printed and easy to install, and what happens in that world where people are no longer buying Stanley tools and toolboxes. Again, that was kind of the premise. Like after we had gone through the detailed incubation, and brought the product to where it was, or brought the product idea to where it was, probably 3 or 4 months later, Apple came out with like a tool that could service a lot of the things that we were talking about doing. And so like immediately you had this major competitor move into the market, and then again a few months later had Stanley X shutter its doors. And so it's just a good lesson. Obviously those are extreme circumstances, and those are signals that maybe there isn't the market opportunity that we once thought that there were. But as you mentioned, like you kind of have to continuously evaluate, where do we sit, where does this idea sit, like is it something that we can create a meaningful business off of? Even if you have a great idea and a great market opportunity, it's still really, really difficult to start and build a company. So you need to have that conviction that there is that opportunity and the ecosystem is in the right place. And again, that constant self-evaluation, as you mentioned, is paramount to success.
Yeah. So knowing that you had kind of this unfortunate series of events with your first startup, tell me, I mean, that led you to Luxonis. Give me like
Mhm.
the 15,000-foot overview of the organization, what it is that you do, who you're servicing, just that
Yeah.
real top level.
Yeah, at a very high level, what we do is we manufacture computer vision AI-enabled cameras. So we describe it as being the eyes, ears, and brains of robotics and automated systems. And the company itself services Fortune 500 companies. Have over 40 of the global Fortune 500 are customers of ours. 15 of the Dow Jones Industrial Average are customers of ours, and down to startups who are just creating their first prototype in their basement or in their garage. And it spans tons of different industries. Within like the revenue organization, we're working with people through a wide range of different organization types and different needs, where like they may have massive engineering teams where they're just looking for a little bit of guidance, and we're helping them out with some more like business operational stuff, or it could be someone who again is trying to create their first product and they need a lot of technical help, or even a combination of those two. It's a really interesting and diverse set of people that we get to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a huge marketplace for this. As A lot of organizations are trying to become more lean, especially in any sort of operational space, when especially large commercial spaces. Because I mean, I was spending some time on your website, and it looks like that's one of the major places that you guys are able to implement your technology.
Yeah, we really divide our customers into two different category types. So obviously there's a breadth of different industries, but there's those who are solving robotics related problems, and that's typically in layman's terms the way that we're thinking about that is somebody who's has some type of robot that is moving around in space or is going to have a changing visual perception of what they of the environment that they're interacting with. And then the other one is automation. And so that we kind of think of it as a static use case where the camera is sitting somewhere in a facility or in a room or whatever, and it's gathering information from the real world and using that information to send triggers into a system, a larger system, uh, to help influence some type of action. And so we're talking about, you were kind of alluding to, manufacturing and warehousing use cases, which are very common for us, where people are doing, QA of the products that they are creating along a manufacturing line. They're doing inventory reconciliation, a number of those different types of things, which just help give feedback to their overall system.
Tell me about you. You guys manufacture the hardware and support it with the software. I mean, that seems like quite a challenge. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean it's a tremendous challenge. Building hardware is really really difficult, and there are a lot of layers that go into just building the hardware itself. We're about a 100-person team, and 85% of that is engineering, as we have a very deep technical stack that we need to have expertise in. So just to walk you through some of the basics of what we need. First, there's just the general mechanical design of the industrial grade brushed aluminum IP rated cameras that need to be working in a variety of different environments. So on top of the mechanical engineers, there's electrical engineers who are making sure all of the components work together and can get power and process the data and information correctly. There's firmware engineers who are allowing us to, basically who are writing the programming that lets the hardware talk with the traditional software that people think of. And then you have AI, computer vision, machine learning engineers, application engineers all on top of that. And that's just building the camera in and of itself. That doesn't really talk about all of the calibration components to make sure that it works well, the manufacturing ops team that we have to ensure that we have consistent quality devices getting produced for the thousands of customers who are buying our products all over the world. And then all of that stuff just gets you a piece of hardware. Well, that piece of hardware doesn't even do anything without the application layer on top. So, the firmware team is written a really great API, and we get a lot of compliments on its usability. Even though our cameras are edge or AI enabled, and they can do some amazing bits of processing. People have purchased our cameras just for the ease of use to do simple things like streaming video, just because they have complete control of the device itself, where they don't elsewhere. So it's all of those complicated things that are, again, just giving you the canvas to be able to solve the variety of different problems that people are solving with our cameras. And we have to do, like, this is something that we always have to look at as a cost benefit analysis in what can we build on a platform sense that allows and unlocks certain market spaces or use cases of our product versus what should we be allowing our customers and having our customers just build on top of. And that's where I think it's helpful that we have an open source, like our an open source firmware and an API that people can customize and bend to their particular needs. And so again, we try to create that blank canvas. We try to give people as many tools as we possibly can to help them solve, again, dozens of different problems in dozens of different industries.
So you had mentioned the open source software and the API. You guys have built kind of a development community around the brand. Why is that important to your brand success?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's the one of the main reasons for our success and growth. When the company first started, we basically sold our first products on Kickstarter, and it broke all kinds of records with the early products. And it was really the development community that was the support and the reason why we were able to launch and be successful. So it's close to our hearts in our origins, and from there, we're ultimately trying to solve problems that the developers and like roboticists are having. And so we have to stay as close to the pulse of that group as we possibly can. So we have very active forums where, we're constantly, discussing things with anyone who's working with our cameras. Like we try to give as much customer support as we possibly can. So that community aspect, again, it was the genesis for the company and us being able to find success and find a place in the market. And it's a way for us to understand the needs that people are having, when ultimately what we're trying to do is just simplify computer vision, give them a camera that works right out of the box and solves their vision needs, so that they can think about the larger systems that they're trying to build and not have to worry about that component. We're trying to be, really solid, let them process what they need to. And for that, the depth of variance in types of data that people need and how they need it, and through different connections and through different syncings and timings, like all of those things, vary depending on the use case. Like if you just think, in a very simplistic sense about, the way that that you operate in light versus dark environments. If you have tons of light shining in your eyes and all of a sudden, the lights go out, right? Like it's a very different environment that you're in. And it's, we're trying to build tools so that people can interact with the environment regardless of the conditions that they're in, and the external effects that are going to change the performance of the camera. So trying to create this singular device or a small set of devices that allow people to again, just take this camera, plug it in, have it work, and go solve their problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right, that you guys started focusing solely on the hardware and then allowed open source software to happen, and because of that, it has created so many unique use cases for you. You know, it, has that been one of the things that have really kind of spurred the growth, that you can allow other organizations to kind of build their own unique use case based off of their unique needs, because you're allowing them to do what they need with the equipment through open source software?
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, just a couple of examples of that. There's this company that creates a program called Touch Designer, and what Touch Designer effectively allows people to do is interact with the real world in 3D space and have visuals get laid over the top of it. That's not an industry that we have looked at all, but I would say, it's kind of one of our burgeoning opportunities, where almost on a weekly basis we get people asking questions about it because they have some art installation or some interactive display where they are using our cameras to interact with this Touch Designer platform to create whatever it is. There was a company that did a really cool interactive display at CES, and they used our cameras. And my hunch is that they probably used that program or something similar. But like the point being is that, that's just one anecdote of a use case where we have not done anything to move into that particular industry, but the ease of use of our cameras, the fact that people can work with it, basically build on top of it however they need to for their own products, means that there's this whole opportunity that has opened up. And again, that happens in a number of different spaces. The cameras are kind of designed to be as versatile as human eyes are, in basically taking the information from the physical world and passing it into the digital world. And if you think of all of the types of decisions that you make with your eyes on a daily basis, it's quite mind-blowing. Just simply navigating through space is one, being able to recognize objects, pick up objects. And even from that, there's a lot of context that you can draw from scenes and around individual objects just by looking at the space. And so if you think about the wide lens of opportunity that is there, really it's almost a requirement that we have this open source layer so that people can program and use the cameras to solve their particular needs.
Would you recommend, so say there was a fledgling company that was starting to make hardware, would you recommend them implementing some sort of community or open source community around their product to help spur the growth and allow for all of these unique use cases? Or is it a challenge to manage all the unique use cases?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you said, a young company, an early stage company starting something in hardware, the first thing is it's extremely difficult to do, to get off the ground at all. It's my almost knee-jerk reaction would be to say don't. But, all jokes aside, yeah, there are, there's two ways to look at it. And I think that each individual scenario is going to merit consideration of either path. And one is that you know exactly what you want your hardware to do, and there's a specific use case that you are building and designing for, and you don't want the noise of what happens with an open source community. You just want to go through and build it and get to the required feature set to perform whatever task or solve whatever problem you're trying to solve. And that it may be better to have the blinders on and focus on that. And in another instance, the beauty of open source is that we get to experience and talk with people who are using our stuff for like all of these immense use cases. And so there are market opportunities that we see developing in front of us that realistically we have no business being the person who solves that problem, given what the expertise of our company is. There's stuff in shipping, or there's stuff in the medical field, or stuff in agriculture, and we don't have anybody who are experts in those spaces. But because we've solved this vision problem, we've built this stack on top and looked at all of these problems, right? Like now it allows us to go in and address almost anybody's problems with with a variety of different lenses. And we understand what it means to have like a tough environment to be working in, whether that's weather conditions, whether that's high vibration, like any of those things are like they can be very challenging spaces. And so for us to have experience with that, have people who are asking us questions about those things, who are building tools like on top of our platform to solve things in those spaces, right? Like it's just opened up a huge amount of market opportunity. And the drawback from that is ultimately that, it can take your attention in a lot of different ways. And, that's something that, you have to be prepared for, because maintaining focus as an early stage company is super critical.
I think that kind of goes back to like knowing your why and reevaluating all the time, is just trying to stay as focused as you can on your singular problem that you're looking to solve well. And then, if other people have great use cases for how they're using your product, great.
Yeah.
I'm sure you welcome the revenue. It's like, no, you're not you weren't in our initial ICP, so we're just going to ignore you. It's like, oh wow, this is an untapped market that I didn't know I had an opportunity in.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely. It's quite amazing, again, what people are doing with our cameras. We find it's really inspiring on a daily basis, talking to all of the customers who are doing all of these really, really interesting things. And again, they're not markets, as you mentioned, that we would have thought that we were going into. We are really just trying to focus on the vision problem, right? Like we're the perception engine that is allowing and enabling these robotics and automated systems. That's our focus. We're trying to be the best that we possibly can be at that, and let other people build on top of it, because vision is such a core requirement to solve all of the challenges that people are trying to solve when thinking about physical AI and taking what the world that we interact with as human beings and trying to have some digital interface to it.
So let's change topic just a little bit. And what do you see the biggest challenge for your organization in the next year? And what steps are you guys taking to kind of overcome that?
Yeah, I'd probably put it as like there are two or three, and it feels like they change on a daily basis. Right now, there's obviously been some upheaval in the the global economies and the global supply chain. And us as we manufacture, we manufacture products in China, and we manufacture products in Taiwan. So, navigating that right now is probably our most urgent need, as there just isn't a lot of clarity in what the world is going to look like in 6 months or 12 months. And we need to be prepared for a number of different paths that may end up revealing themselves as the new normal. So that's one of them. And then, kind of the ongoing problem that we, always have is, we're continuously trying to raise the bar on quality for our products. As we started out, as mentioned, with the hobbyist community being the place where we got our footing, and we didn't actively choose to pivot into the enterprise space, but it ended up happening where 90% of our revenue originally was coming from consumers, and now 90% of our revenue is coming from businesses. And it's just an entirely different customer base to be serving. And so, we're constantly trying to push the quality of our products, the quality of our service, the quality of everything within the organization to be able to work with these multinationals who, they have much larger budgets than we do and have a lot more people that they can throw at a problem. And so, for us, like as we're trying to grow up and become an organization that can, very well service, dozens of these types of clients, it's, how do we manage our time and our resources so that when we do win these deals, we're able to service them well and build those relationships, but, keep enough of the resources internally focused on developing and pushing the product forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of organizations right now that are really uneasy about the tariffs that are coming. Are we at the end of seeing the escalation, or are we just at the beginning? Is it going to get worse before it gets better? Should you look for, alternative manufacturing? I know that there's a ton of organizations that have been hugely impacted by it. And you're right. I think that there is a lot of uncertainty around it, and there's just no way about it. Like, it's hard to predict the next 6 months, let alone the next, 1 year to two, just because of what's happening. And then I think that all organizations, you want to iterate, you want to improve the quality of what it is that you're offering over time. That's how you retain your customers. They want to see you improve. I know that I've worked with a lot of organizations where, like, I single-handedly helped improve the product because of customer suggestions. So
Yep.
taking that feedback and then figuring out the best way to implement it into a platform that makes sense in a way that is usable across all use cases. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally understand those things.
Yeah.
Jim,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, you talked on something that is very core to our challenge in decision making, and where we get all this feedback from customers, as you can imagine, there's dozens of different use cases, and everybody wants it to be tweaked a little bit to work perfectly for their scenario. And on one hand, it's amazing that we have customers who are so engaged and who are really interested in the product and invested in the product, and they want to see it be better. And the challenge for us is, how do we filter out all of that information to try to be as true to our customers as we possibly can by developing those features that are going to make them be more successful with the products, and also be true to the business, and make sure that we're only developing those features that are actually going to give us a material return. We obviously want to be able to do everything for everyone, but we have limited resources. And so until we can get to a larger scale and have niche teams that are working on problems for each individual industry, we have to continuously solicit that feedback and listen to that feedback, and cherry pick the stuff that is going to have the most impact for the most number of people.
I don't necessarily think it's cherry picking. I think that you have to take the time to identify the theme, right?
Hmm.
What is the bigger theme that the customer is asking for? Oh, they're looking for like a workflow process on top of this. Cool. There we go. That's something that's actionable. Like, trying to figure out and distill the feedback into themes that makes it actionable to improve the product for every use case is, I think, it's a hard skill to learn from anybody, but it's why you have product people.
Yeah, precisely.
Cool. Jim, you've been a great guest. I really appreciate your time today. At the end of each one of my podcast episodes, I give my guests 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So this could be Luxonis, this could be anything. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Yeah, I'll take the opportunity to talk about Luxonis. Really excited with what we are building as an organization. As I mentioned before, we work with early stage robotics companies, robotics organizations, student organizations, so very early stage, young entrepreneurial, ambitious companies, all the way up to Fortune 500 companies who are deploying our units at scale. And the types of problems that we're solving are those that are really genuinely improving people's lives. They're saving lives in instances. They are reducing like arduous, boring, difficult work into and exchanging that for stuff that is that is really thought provoking and interesting. What we're building as a company is it's going to be really fascinating to watch it change the world as we start to give machines the ability to interact with humans in their daily life and be a participant in our lives and really improve it. And so, we're at the very beginning of our journey, but we've come a long way at this point. Have over 6,000 businesses who use our cameras in all of these different use cases, and we're always excited to talk to more customers and more people about the types of problems that they're solving, because it's fascinating what humans are capable of doing and what they're capable of solving and the problems that they come up with. And it's just great that we're an individual tool in helping enable some of those solutions.
Well, Jim, thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.